Now, as a human, I firmly believe there are places even on this planet that our species is just simply not meant to go to. And there are good reasons why we can't survive in the Arctic or Antarctica without all kinds of special equipment, and that is that we're not supposed to be there. So, this one tonight is a biggie. Well, it deals with all kinds of issues. The concept of isolation and the psychological strain of being out in the middle of nowhere without contact with others. Then, of course, there's the unseen threat of something that we simply can't comprehend. And beyond this, also, there's the very nature of humanity. What does it mean to be a human? What does it mean to be an individual? And what kinds of things can threaten that? So, there's a lot going on this one. I think you're really going to love it. I did. And of course, I'll be asking you later to give your thoughts and feelings on it. Anyway, without further ado, here we go with There's Something Out There Underneath the Ice by Impossible Bit 995. Part 1. Bishop to g5. I said into the microphone. Bishop takes pawn. Check. There was a faint electric crackle over the headset as Donovan considered his next move. We were miles apart, separated by a heavy snowstorm that left the outside world in a blur of white fuzz. In my mind, I could still see him squirming in his computer chair, could picture his lips gently moving as he whispered to himself his next move. King to d7, Donovan replied. Can't. Queen at a4. You'll put yourself in check. A faint groan escaped through the headphones. Donovan had been operating on maybe 3 hours of sleep. His head wasn't in the game. The nightmares were getting to him, getting to us all in their own way, but I was used to little sleep. Before I started working at the United States Remote Research Station, Outpost Delta, I lived with my older brother and his girlfriend. They had a 2-year-old and a newborn. Sleep was a luxury that I hadn't experienced for about 3 years running. Fine, Donovan said defiantly. King to c8. Knight to e7. Check. Again. Emma, you think I don't see what you're doing? Please, enlighten me. I had to stifle the laughter from my voice. What am I doing? You're trying to force me into the corner, Donovan returned. You're lucky I don't have my queen anymore. Your king's wide open. You should probably do something about that once you're not in check. Yeah, real funny. You keep laughing. He didn't make a move for a while, and when he did, there was a growl in his voice. King to b8. Well, you're getting awfully close to that corner, my friend. Why couldn't we have just played Guess Who like I wanted? Because we've played Guess Who almost 100 times by now. I'm sick of it. Yeah, but I hate chess. I actually hate it. You just don't have the patience for it. In the year we'd known each other, that was the first thing I came to find out about him. The second was that he was an immense cinephile. When he wasn't wasting his time playing board games with me or working, he was on the couch watching a movie with a bag of popcorn in his lap. You know what I miss? He said. Papa John's Pizza and Netflix? Well, come on, who doesn't? We laughed about that. I miss RuneScape. I never got into it. Brother did for a while. Let me tell you, it's a lot more fun than chess. Oh, you're only saying that because you're losing. Before he could respond, another voice intercepted our conversation. Hey, either you talked to Edvard lately? It was Mia from Cabin G. We're all part of a research team observing odd phenomena in the Arctic. Recent tremors and unusual climate habits, harsh storms. At least 2 or 3 occurrences a week followed by hot days. Not necessarily hot in the normal sense, but relatively. It was warmer in the Arctic than it should have been. No, I don't think so. I double-checked the daily log beside my computer rig. He hasn't been on the public channel since this morning. Don? Mia asked. A quick call on a private channel around 2 or 3, he said. Nothing important. Just wanted to see if I needed any more supplies before he sends the registry to the company. Why, what's up? He got a hold of me about an hour ago. A little early for a booty call, don't you think? The airwaves went silent aside from the static. I clapped my hand over my mouth to keep from laughing. Sorry, not funny. Donovan said, but his tone implied otherwise. Seriously, though, what's up? Nothing, she said. I just can't get a hold of him. He's probably taking a nap. Hard to keep a normal sleep schedule out here. Well, he wasn't wrong. The nights felt endless, and the daytime was fleeting at best. Perpetual darkness around the clock. The increasing storms weren't helping either. It's hard to get out from under the covers when you were constantly bombarded by the cold. Our cabins had heating systems, but it just wasn't the same. It wasn't as cozy or safe as being beneath the blankets the company provided us with. Some days, you know the type, I didn't get out of my pajamas. On those mornings, I wouldn't even bother with a cup of coffee. Instead, I'd just make some hot chocolate, curl up in my computer chair with a blanket draped across my shoulders, and try not to fall asleep. It's especially difficult during the off-season. The rest of our colleagues were airlifted home for the holidays. The four of us volunteered to stay behind as the skeleton crew, keep up with the research and monitoring until the new year passed. The others were scheduled to return January 6th. Then we'd get transported back home for about a week and a half to visit our relatives or do whatever we wanted. Not a bad trade-off considering the extra pay. Time and a half for the weekdays, double time for the weekends. I don't know, Mia said softly. Her voice was a faint whisper against the wall of static from the storm. Something doesn't feel right. What did he last say to you? I asked. Well, he thought someone was knocking on his door. Ah, bullshit, Donovan cut in. No, he did. I'm not saying he didn't, but that's impossible. There's no one else here but us. The guy just needs to get more sleep. Again, he wasn't wrong. But to get more sleep implied getting any sleep to begin with. Well, that's not all, Mia continued. He checked outside his front door and found footprints in the snow. Thought he saw someone out there too. I swiveled in my chair, turning to access the navigational radar to the left of my computer. The display showed a circular grid with all the cabins pre-rendered into the system. When we had a full team, there would have been 26 colored dots on the screen, one at every cabin. Instead, there were only 4 available. One at cabin C, Donovan, another at cabin J, that was me, and a third at cabin Y, Mia. Edvard was supposed to be at cabin R, but his transmitter was casting a signal about 2 miles north of cabin M. What the hell? I whispered, restarting the system in hopes that it might recalibrate. Well, it had done this before, almost 2 months ago. There was an interference of some kind that set all of our equipment on the fritz. GPS kept scattering our transmitters. Lights were going on and off. Communications were down for half the cabins. Everything was a mess. Oscar from cabin D even had his power go out. Luckily, the backup generator kicked on long enough until Rita from cabin L got over there to perform some much-needed maintenance on his fuse box. Blown circuit, corroded wires. Whole thing had to be replaced. It was a bad time for Donovan. The company couldn't send replacement parts for almost a week, so he and Oscar had to share a living space for a little while. Well, the cabins were about the size of a studio apartment, maybe slightly bigger. As you might imagine, cramped spaces aren't an ideal environment for multiple people. And you can't exactly complain about the other person without being overheard. Well, after the fact, they were good sports about it. Oscar requested a care package during a supply order. Chocolate-covered cherries, variety pack of chips, and a whole assortment of other goodies that he sent Donovan's way. In return, Donovan ordered some books, movies, and video games for Oscar's 3DS. Eventually, the radar came back online, and the dots remained the same. Edvard's transmitter still put him out by cabin M, located in the middle of nowhere. Hey, Mia, I spoke into the mic. Did Edvard say anything else to you? No, she said. I told him they were probably his footprints from last night or something. Told him there's no one out here but us. Well, I checked the radar. Looks like he's out by Henry's place. What the hell is he doing out there? Donovan remarked. No clue, I said. You guys keep trying his handheld. I'll take the snowcat out to him and see what's going on. If you manage to get a hold of him, radio me. The cabins were each located about a mile apart from one another. The distance could vary depending on the terrain. A lengthy distance on foot, but a quick trip for the plough. Of course, that was assuming the weather would be forgiving. Unfortunately, it wasn't. Snow came down in curtains, pelting the windshield with bits of ice sticking to its surface. I turned the wipers on, but there was only so much they could do in a storm. It took me about a half hour to get there. When I arrived, I couldn't be sure if Edvard was actually present. Everything was white, and the snow flurries were funneling in a conical pattern, spinning around me until up was down and left was right. I pulled the hood of my coat over my head and anchored myself to the snowcat with climbing rope, thick and durable, a reel almost 100 yards in length, enough to travel the span of a football field. Well, it might sound dumb, but in an environment like that, it doesn't take much to get lost. With the low temps, you can't be exposed to the cold for more than maybe 10 to 20 minutes without facing serious repercussions. I had to wonder how long Edvard had been out there, how long he'd been exposed. I checked the compass I kept in my coat pocket and wandered out into the storm, heading northeast. Every analyst was equipped with proper gear for outdoor travel: boots, an insulated coat and pants, gloves, goggles, and a face mask. But still, the cold was unbearable. Felt like my skin was on fire, and I'd only been out there for a few minutes. I called out to Edvard, but there was no response. The howl of the wind was too ferocious, too powerful. Every word was swallowed by it, suppressed into a muffled whisper. I got lucky, though. Edvard had left his snowcat's headlights on, and through the mist I followed the pair of yellow beams until I stood before the mechanical beast. The windows were frosted over, and the exterior was coated in snow. I pulled on the handle and threw the driver's side door open. Well, it was empty, but the interior lights were still on. I could hear Donovan's and Mia's voices coming in over the radio. "Houston to Edvard. You there, Edvard?" Donovan said. "Did you read me, Space Cadet?" "Ed," came Mia. "Can you hear me?" I moved to answer their calls, but then, out the other window, I saw a silhouette against the white backdrop of the blizzard. I leapt from the snowcat and sprinted towards the shadow. My boots were heavy and awkward. The insulated padding for the coat and pants didn't allow much in the way of mobility. It was like trying to walk in one of those inflatable Halloween costumes, constantly stumbling with every step. Eventually, after waddling the last 10 feet or so, I'd reached him. He stood still as a corpse, staring down at the ground. He was dressed in gear similar to mine, his own colored a shade of orange. But after so long in the storm, it had all been frosted white, an anatomically correct snowman. Usually you can tell when a person is breathing because of the fog around their mouth, but there was no such mist with Edvard, no indication of life until I grabbed his shoulder. Then he turned towards me, his face concealed beneath a pair of goggles and a thick balaclava. "Come on," I yelled. "You're going to freeze to death out here." Somehow, in spite of the wind or the sound of my beating heart, I heard Edvard speak, a frail, breathless whisper. "I was here." Part 2. The wind ripped at my jacket, pulled at the length of rope connecting me to the plow. "Ed," I begged, "we have to go." This time he didn't say anything. He just stared at me, a blank look in his eyes. "Ed," I yelled. "Never mind. Screw it." We didn't have time to stand around talking. Every second out there was another second closer to hypothermia. I pulled him away back towards my snowcat. Edvard's feet stumbled against the ground, somewhat walking but mostly dragging. I forced him into the passenger seat of my plow and unhooked myself from the anchor rope. With a click of a button, it retracted onto the reel. Climbing into the driver's seat, I closed the door and cranked the heat as high as it would go. God, I was exhausted. Felt as if I'd just finished a marathon. But really, we'd traveled less than a mile. I yanked the goggles off my head and wiped the sweat and tears away before taking hold of the control levers. Then we started for my cabin. Along the way, I radioed the others to let them know what had happened.
"Is he all right?"
Mia asked. "What the hell was he doing?" said Donovan. "I've got him safe and sound. That's all that matters right now," I replied. "I'll get back to you once we're at the cabin." Then I turned off the radio to focus on the drive. The storm was picking up, smearing the landscape into a swirl of white. The Arctic could be a beautiful place if you ignore the cold. Glittering stretches of open terrain, an endless sky that sometimes was blue as the ocean or red as fire. Pink in the early morning, maybe a shade of purple late at night with soft tinges of vibrant green. But most of the time, especially in the winter months, it was black, dark as the bottom of the sea. In that moment, I felt a sense of nostalgia for my first week at the research station, long before I'd become inured to the boredom and treacherous nature of the Arctic. In a strange way, perhaps even in a nonsensical, inexplicable way, I'd felt like an astronaut, as if I were exploring what few had seen before, a lone life form adrift in the barren void of space. Special, not because of who I was or what I could do, but because of what I was in relation to my environment. An odd entity that existed somewhere it wasn't meant to be. A flower in the desert. A heartbeat amongst the dead. That feeling quickly abandoned me during my second or third week. My sense of awe had been combated by the long hours of nothing, trapped inside my cabin for hours on end. All my distaste for the Arctic, for the cold and the snow, came with relative ease. "Where are we?" Edvard asked.
"We're heading back to my cabin."
He reached up and pulled the fur-lined hood from his head, peeled the goggles from his eyes, tugged the balaclava down around his neck. His cheeks were red, his lips chapped. Edvard was a handsome man in his early 30s, tan skin that had taken a softer tone from his time in the north, time spent away from the sunlight. A hard jawline with cheeks stippled by the makings of a beard. Thick, tangled hair sat on his head, brown as oak wood, drenched from sweat and snow into a darker shade than usual. The thing I'd noticed about Edvard when he first met me were his eyes, glacial blue and intense, the kind that were easy to get lost in if you weren't careful, always watching, observing, assessing every minute detail. We sometimes joked that he was a reptile because we never saw him blink. And at first, it might seem disquieting, off-putting to the average person, but you quickly adjusted to it, to him, because beneath that severity, beneath that intense gaze was a profound warmth. Kindness, selflessness, intellect that went beyond amassed knowledge to a deep, unfathomable grasp of empathy, of emotions and compassion. Well, if it weren't already apparent, I admired Edvard, found his gentleness, his genuine nature commendable, especially during a period of time when society's norms did not always condone such behaviors. Furtively, though, I was also envious of him, jealous to a caustic degree. He'd somehow figured out the secret to happiness, had discovered the path to not only fulfillment but a level of contentment that I would never achieve no matter how great my aspirations or achievements. To put it simply, I woke up every morning intent on working to earn my paycheck like everybody else. Edvard, though, woke with the sole purpose of enlightening himself. No grandiose expectations, no incessant grind in search of monetary success. He lived and breathed for the sole purpose of experience, to do the best he could, and at the end of the day, probably acknowledge his efforts regardless of the results. Maybe that's why I'd been so surprised to hear Edvard say, "You should have left me out there." "What?" "You should have left me on the ice out in the storm." "You would have froze. I'm surprised you're still alive, Ed. You'll be lucky if you don't contract something serious." "I'm already sick." "Probably because you were standing in the middle of a snowstorm. What in God's name were you thinking?" Edvard turned towards me then, that faraway look in his eyes. "There was someone out there." "You're imagining things. There's no one out here but us." "They're out there." "No one's out there. The company would have told us if they were bringing anyone in, and as far as I'm aware, the next research station is almost 30 miles away." Well, the cold was making me irritable. I wanted nothing more than to get back, take a warm bath, and drink some hot chocolate. Maybe play another game of chess with Donovan if he was willing to lose again, or listen to music while watching the snowfall. I was an avid fan of low roar. Their music was oddly redolent of the Arctic, morbidly beautiful, haunting and surreal. I exhaled my grievances. It's just us, Ed. He didn't seem convinced, but he said nothing more of the matter and leaned back in his seat, closing his eyes. I've got a headache. We'll get you some aspirin when we get back. Gently, he massaged his temples as if to work the kinks from his brain. Thank you, Emily. I hated when people called me by the wrong name, but Edvard wasn't in a state of mind to be scolded or reprimanded. I'll keep you overnight to monitor your status, I said, and assuming you haven't developed hypothermia by then, I'll take you back home in the morning. Maybe Donovan will help me retrieve your snowcat at some point. Edvard showed no interest in the current subject and instead said, I had a dream about you last night. I scoffed. Oh, for both our sakes, don't tell me of that. You were dancing at the center of the sun, Edvard continued. I think you were laughing. Even as the inferno swallowed you whole, you looked as if you were laughing. I blinked. The silence between us swelled, combated only by the sound of the wind as it thrashed the metal exterior of the snowcat. Maybe we should let this just be a time of silent reflection, I suggested. Take a moment to really think before we speak. Surprisingly, this made Edvard laugh, a subtle gradual thing that soon filled the inner cabin of the snowcat. Well, if nothing else, he said, you're funnier than me. I shook my head in disbelief. Thanks. Glad to see the cabin fever hasn't completely turned you mad. Again, he croaked with laughter, a small humored chuckle that sat in his throat like the call of a toad. Humor is a good trait to possess, he told me. From what I've surmised, the general population appreciates good humor over almost anything else. They find it charismatic, endearing. The cold had corroded his brain, left him in a detached state, trying to further distance himself from the trauma he'd endured, from the realization that he'd faced the distinct possibility of death not 20 minutes prior. Well, I wasn't going to burst that bubble, wasn't going to ruin his method of coping. Well, simply I told him, Ed, I think that's a very astute conclusion. This seemed to invoke some semblance of joy within him, a hint of pride for his meager assessment, and we were able to finish the remainder of our drive in peace. When we finally reached my cabin, I killed the snowcat's engine and climbed out from the cab. I lagged behind, allowing Edvard to pass me and enter the cabin first, convinced that he might try to run away if I weren't there to block him. But now that I was with him, that he was no longer alone with his thoughts, he seemed cooperative, compliant, more so than usual. Now, Edvard was the unofficial leader of our little group, the spokesman for the skeleton crew. He ordered our supplies and reported to the company whenever they reached out, which wasn't often since most back at headquarters were away for the holiday. He didn't have any real authority, not like our actual superiors. He couldn't order us about or terminate our positions or anything like that. But he'd been taking on some of the responsibilities the rest of us wished to avoid, and for that we were all grateful. Maybe that had been affecting him. Maybe that's what had driven him out into the storm. The surmounted pressure and additional stress coupled with the inevitable madness provoked by isolation, by a lack of sunlight and exercise. Well, I would have asked him about it, not that he necessarily would have admitted this, but I was bone cold and exhausted. Didn't want to have a serious conversation right then. Didn't want to deal with the burden. I just wanted to call it a night and relax. Handle it in the morning after I'd had some rest, or about as close to rest as I could get. So instead of talking, I ran a hot shower and let Edvard wash up first. I threw his clothes into the laundry and started cooking tomato soup and grilled cheese sandwiches for dinner. Then I radioed the others to give them an update. Well, they had more questions than I had answers. I told them what little I knew and promised to give any updates if I found out more. An empty promise. Edvard was an adult, fully capable of making his own choices. If he wanted to talk, I was more than willing to listen. But in my mind, the last thing I would have wanted at a time like this was someone else poking and prodding, dissecting my every thought and decision as if I were no more than a hapless child. That didn't mean I wasn't going to keep an eye on him, though. He was in my cabin and therefore under my supervision. Until I felt comfortable enough with his current state of well-being, I wasn't going to let him leave. Some people might think I was being completely ignorant or stupid. Maybe I was to some degree. But I would tell those people you weren't there. You don't know Edvard like I do. Not that we're exactly close, but we've all been working together for the better part of a year, forced to spend almost every day within close proximity. It's not like we just clocked out at the end of the workday, not like we could go to the bar on the weekends. If we wanted to socialize, it was with each other. If we wanted to play games or share a drink or have a movie night, there were only so many people we could do that with. Friendship or not, we were victims of circumstance, animals sharing the same exhibit. You either learn to appreciate the company of the other 25 individuals around you, or you spend all your time locked inside your cabin slowly losing your mind. At this point, I'd had more conversations with Edvard or Donovan or Mia, or any of the other 23 analysts than I'd had with my actual friends, possibly even certain members of my family. We were more than familiar with each other. Edvard was whimsical, but he wasn't an idiot. He wasn't crazy or insane or anything like that. He was fully self-aware, more cognizant than 90% of the people I'd encountered throughout my life. And from what I could tell, he didn't seem depressed. Wasn't displaying negative behavior to lead me to suspect that he'd gone out into the storm with the intention of dying. Still, despite my rationality, he had gone out there for a reason. There was intention. I don't know, he admitted between bites of his grilled cheese. About half of his tomato soup still remained, wafting little streams of mist into the air. I really thought someone was out there. I would have put all my money on it, every last dollar. And your first instinct was to go after them? I said. I didn't want them to freeze. He took another bite and chewed. Didn't you do the same thing for me? Well, that's different. I was almost certain you were out there. The transmitter even said so. Still, there was a slight chance that I wasn't. Well, I guess. But you went out there anyway. All right, Ed, you've convinced me. Next time I notice you're miles from your cabin in the middle of a snowstorm, I'll just leave you be. He laughed. No, that's not what I'm getting at. What are you getting at then? He contemplated this as he chewed, going back and forth between his sandwich and soup until neither remained. Human nature is self-destructive at its core, he finally said. It's practically intrinsic to do anything in our power to help another member of the species without any regard for our own well-being. I looked at him for a long time without saying anything. Bemused by his statement, stupefied even. Then, when I did speak, I told him, "You've severely misinterpreted human nature, if that's what you believe." Oh? He seemed disappointed. Is that so? Enlighten me then. Gladly. I set my sandwich on the plate and leaned back in my seat. Have I ever told you about my father? He racked his brain for a memory that I already knew didn't exist. He was a good person, I explained. Served in the army for about 7.5 years. Honorably discharged due to mental concerns. Spent the rest of his life working minimum wage at a steel mill during the week. Nighttime security gigs at a bar downtown on the weekends. One day, I told him, he just dies. Heart failure. No warnings, really. He was overweight and had been a smoker in his younger days, but other than that, fit as a fiddle. Okay. Well, we didn't have much money growing up. We were just above the poverty line. So as you might imagine, we struggled to pay the funeral charges. It's expensive to properly dispose of a body, whether you cremate or bury. What did you do? We went to the VA, but they weren't going to cover it. Started a fundraiser online and in person. Well, that helped. People donated more than I expected. But at the end of the day, my family was stuck with a substantial bill. One that we're still paying, and it's been almost 3 years. Edvard frowned. I'm not fully grasping. The point is, there are good people and bad people. Two sides to every coin. But self-destructive, in a selfless, sacrificial way? No, I don't think so. I pushed my plate away. My appetite had abandoned me. There's a reason humanity still exists while other species go extinct. We're hardwired for survival. Our sense of self-preservation is greater than our innate emotional response to the condition of others. You think people should have donated more, until they had nothing left to give? Not at all. I don't hold a grudge, don't have any grievances. Hell, I'd probably do the same thing if I was in the same circumstances. But if our empathy is as great as you want to believe, we wouldn't have struggled in the least to pay for my father's funeral. There wouldn't be homelessness or poverty or starving nations. Society wouldn't completely break at the first sight of a pandemic. These things do exist. They happen because we're self-centered, most of us at least. We worry about number one and hope number 2 or 3 or 4 never come knocking on our door in search of help. Then why did you come out looking for me? I don't know. Just couldn't stand the idea of a coworker, a friend, being out there, left alone like that. Maybe you don't give the human race enough credit. Or maybe I'm just an idiot lacking the necessity for self-preservation. I'm not entirely convinced. He smiled then, a gentle pull at the corner of his lips. I possess enough knowledge, sufficient memories and experience to know that humanity can be full of destruction and hostility, but there's still compassion out there, enough altruism to deem worthwhile. It's a species worth protecting, one worth being a part of, don't you think? I scoffed. This conversation was absurd, but the question itself was beyond ridiculous. Not exactly what I'd expected from that night. It was commonplace to discuss politics or literature, pop culture and movies, weekend plans or outings with the family. The sanctity of humanity, the value of society, that just wasn't a popular topic. I think it's getting late, I said. I think we're too tired to be discussing ethical dilemmas or analyzing human nature. He put his hands up in surrender. All right, fine. But let me ask you one last thing, and I'll leave it alone. What makes a person? What standards qualify someone as a human being? Easy. They know when to drop a conversation. I retrieved my dishes and carried them over to the sink. Looks like you've still got some learning to do. I guess so. We cleaned up after dinner. I washed and he dried. Then, while Edvard looked through my collection of books and board games, I took a shower. The water was warm and thawed the cold from my body, melted away the stress that had pulled my muscles taut, helped clear the fuzz from my mind. When I stepped out, I found Edvard waiting for me in the doorway of the bathroom. Don't know how long he'd been there, but the moment caught us both by surprise. "What the hell are you doing?" I remarked. He lifted his hand, holding up a book for me to see, a casual expression across his face as if I hadn't caught him watching me in the shower. It might sound stupid, but his nonchalance made any internal alarms go silent. As if it were a misunderstanding, bad timing kind of scenario. "Can I borrow this?" he asked, holding out my father's copy of Thomas Ligotti's The Conspiracy Against the Human Race on display. Sure." I waited a moment, towel wrapped around my body, before asking, "You mind getting out so I can change?" He frowned. A reddish hue flooded his cheeks. "Right, sorry. Yeah, just one of those days." He backed out of the bathroom. Again, sorry, completely inappropriate of me. Once the door was closed, I swapped my towel for a pair of checkered pajama bottoms and a plain grey sweatshirt, cotton polymer that was softer than any pillow or cloud in existence. The small things in life are sometimes the most fruitful, little pleasures to make the rest no more than a distant memory. That greasy fast food takeout after a long day at work, the cup of cocoa after spending the morning shoveling your driveway, a tub of cookie dough ice cream after getting dumped by the only girl you ever loved, brief moments of reprieve from reality, distractions to keep your sanity intact, comfort in the simplest form. When I came out of the bathroom, I found Edvard sitting on the couch reading my father's book. He glanced at me and offered a soft smile. A strange way to clear the air, but for the life of me, I couldn't think of a better alternative. I'm sure one existed, but at the time I was still in an awkward mindset of whether I should be upset, pissed, ashamed, or mortified. "I'm going to put the kettle on," I said. "You want a cup of tea?" "Tea? Crushed leaves and hot water." He chuckled. "I know what tea is." He pondered for a moment. "Is it any good?" "You've never had tea before?" "No, yeah, I have, but what kind?" "Well, I've got sleepy time vanilla, peppermint, and throat coat." I checked the cabinet. "I've also got homebrew coffee and hot chocolate with marshmallows." The variety in choice seemed to confuse him. Is that an answer?" Again, that warm, crooked smile. "You know better than me. I'll let you decide." I filled the kettle with water and set it on the burner. Then I went to my rig to perform the nightly check-in. Part 3. Mia was getting ready for bed. It seemed a little early, but lately she'd been laying in bed for hours on end, unable to sleep. Her theory was that if she lay down around 8 or 9 at night, she might be asleep by 10 or 11. Donovan was in the middle of a Studio Ghibli marathon. He'd been watching Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind when I radioed in. Now, for those that don't know Donovan, the last thing you wanted to do was interrupt him during a movie. So I skipped the niceties and any attempt at conversation. Told them I'd check back in the morning. I wanted to mention Edvard, talk about the way he was acting, things he'd been saying, but like with Donovan and Oscar, it was hard to broach the matter with him in the same room, listening to your conversation. After recording temperatures, weather conditions, and seismic activity, I muted my systems and grabbed the kettle from the stove. Poured a cup of sleepy time vanilla for myself and throat coat for Edvard. When I came into the living room, Edvard dog-eared his current page and looked up at me. "Can I ask you something?" "Depends," I said. "What's it about?" "Your father." "Well, you can ask, but I can't promise to give an answer." "Fair enough, all things considered." I set the cup of throat coat on the coffee table in front of him and took a seat in my desk chair at the other end of the room. "All right, shoot," I said. "Shoot?" "Figure of speech, Ed. Never knew you to be so literal." He tittered and shrugged helplessly. "Like I said, a weird day. Feeling a bit off. Like I've just awoken from a dream." "I know that feeling. Sort of like déjà vu." His brow knitted with uncertainty then. "I guess so, yeah." He set the book on the cushion beside him and took his mug by the handle, lifting it to his lips. "Oh, wait a minute, that's..." But he was already gulping it down. Wisps of steam masked his face as he emptied the mug. Then he set it back on the coffee table and exhaled. "Oh, never mind," I muttered. "Guess you don't really need taste buds anyway." I blew on my cocoa before taking a drink. I don't know how he didn't react because I practically scorched the interior of my mouth with just one sip. "Anyways," I said, stifling a yelp, "you had a question about my father." "Right. I was going to ask if you missed him." "Of course. It'd be a crime not to." "Would it?" "Another figure of speech, Ed. Seriously, what's going on with you?" No, I understand. I just mean, what if I didn't miss my own father?" "I wasn't aware your father had passed." He pursed his lips, forming a firm line across his mouth. Both of my parents, actually. They died in a car accident." I couldn't help the shocked expression on my face. Edvard was so vibrant and optimistic. Hard to imagine he'd ever experienced any serious trauma. That's just the way some people coped. Turn to the positive and leave the past behind. Let your shadow follow at your heels instead of plaguing your mind. "I don't really feel much of anything about their deaths," he confessed. "Shouldn't I, though?" "Well, when did it happen?" "I was a child. They were coming back from a date, and I was stuck at home with the babysitter, a young neighbor girl from across the hall." "Well, I remember hearing the police sirens from down the road," he recalled. "When I looked out the window, I could see the lights flashing in the distance. I felt helpless, trapped. I don't know how I knew it was them, I just did. But now I don't feel anything. Like I'm watching that moment on TV, like it was someone else's life. Well, I'm not a psychologist, but it sounds like you're still in shock. He shook his head. No, I remember being in shock at the time. I don't know what this is. You can be in shock more than once. Some realities take years to set in. It's not like you experience it once and it's done. These things come in waves. Well, some days. I paused, wondering if this was something I wanted to share with him, something I wanted to share with anybody. Some days I get up and get out of bed like anybody else. I feel fine, normal. Just go through the motions and that's that. Then there are days when I might hear a certain song or watch a certain movie or read a certain book. It feels like I've lost my father for the first time again. Like I'm back in that moment when my brother called to tell me. Edvard stared at me, wide-eyed and completely enthralled, as if we were sharing some ghost stories around the campfire. Well, it comes and goes, I finished. You don't ever stop grieving, you just learn to carry that weight, to manage it so it doesn't crush you. What if you could forget it? He asked. Lose those memories. Would you? Well, that was a tough question. Well, I suppose the question itself wasn't harder than any other question, but the answer was complicated. Difficult to put into words, to explain outside of just feeling it. Well, I'm not sure, honestly, I said. I mean, it's why people drink or smoke or whatever. Because they want to distract themselves, want to forget their pain. I don't think you can, not without causing more issues for yourself. You'll have to expand on that a little more for me. Life isn't a steak, I explained. You can't just cut away the fatty bits. I wish you could. I suppose some people really do try, but in my experience, it just doesn't work like that. It's a package deal. You get the good with the bad. Trying to eliminate that, cut out the parts you don't like, it'll hurt you as a person. It'll completely erase any tolerance for pain and leave you with unrealistic expectations. You wouldn't really be yourself if you removed the memories you didn't want. To suffer is a better alternative? Well, to suffer is to be human. Just like with love and hate, joy and anger. We have to experience all those emotions at some point or another. Otherwise, we become blind to reality. We seemed enthralled by this notion, completely absorbed by the topic at hand. But I get where you're coming from, I admitted. Yeah, I've been there. So overwhelmed by your grief that you almost find yourself wishing you don't exist, that you weren't real, because then you wouldn't have to feel anything at all. All that heartbreak, all that confusion and madness just fades away if you aren't there to indulge it. It becomes illusory. Edvard leaned back, resting his chin in between his forefinger and thumb. Interesting. Well, it's been a long day, I told him. Let's just call it an early night. Try to get some sleep and clear our heads. Silently, he nodded. I retrieved an extra set of pillows and blankets from the closet. I offered to sleep on the couch, but Edvard refused. He'd already taken the better half of my day with his antics. He didn't want to put me out any further by taking my bed. I was too tired to argue. I turned out the lights and climbed beneath the covers. It took me a while to fall asleep, partially because my brain wouldn't shut down. It's been a problem since childhood. Even when my body was on the brink of collapse, my mind stayed active. But also I wanted to wait until Edvard had fallen asleep. Not that he would have done anything, not that I didn't feel safe around him, but there was just this feeling I had. Didn't know what it was, but I couldn't allow myself to go to bed until I knew he was asleep first. That eventually came when I heard his soft snore sneaking through the dark. Then, and only then, did I close my eyes and relax. Well, it probably comes as no surprise that I dreamt of my father that night. I was outside, caught in the middle of an ice storm. There was nothing around me for miles. Empty fields laden with snow. Endless hills rolling in the distance like the gentle peaks of ebbing ocean waves. The sky was pitch black. No sun, no moon, no stars, just a blank void of darkness. I could hear my father calling out to me. It had been so long since I'd heard his voice, but even then I could tell it wasn't him. It was a guttural sound, sharp and grating, but inexplicably I was convinced that it was my father. The way that dream logic makes no rational sense, but you accept it as fact anyways. I followed the voice through the storm until it came from directly beneath me, and I fell to my knees and started digging. I didn't have a shovel or gloves or any equipment, so I dug with my bare hands. My fingers went from red to pale blue. My muscles ached and burned, but I kept digging, pushing away mound after mound of snow. I found his corpse buried beneath a thick wall of ice, arms raised and hands poised as if trying to claw his way out. I blinked, and my father was replaced by Edvard. I blinked again, and this time it was Donovan. Short black hair and a thin moustache above his upper lip. Skin the colour of milk. Then it was Mia. Long auburn red hair and soft green eyes, mouth partially open as if frozen mid-scream. Lifting my fist, I pounded on the ice, cracking the first layer with relative ease, but struggling to break through anything deeper than that. And the wind picked up. Snow pelted me at an incredible speed, dragging across my flesh like the edge of a razor blade. When I blinked again, Mia was gone. Instead, it was me beneath the ice, a reflection interspersed by a spider web of cracks. Well, I woke up with a lump in my throat, wanting to scream but unable. My lips were locked together. I was paralyzed. At my bedside, Edvard loomed over me. He had a blank gaze in his eyes, looking without seeing, a lantern absent of light. "I am here," he said. His body began to tremble, and a crack split across his face. Blood seeped from the wound, but as it dripped towards the ceiling, I realized it wasn't blood. It was too dark, too viscous. Oddly, it reminded me of a lava lamp I'd had when I was a kid. The fake magma clumps slowly rising to the top, breaking apart and reforming into other clusters. Disobeying the laws of gravity and physics, the substance made contact with the ceiling, spreading across it in a pool of black sludge with tiny pinpricks of white fuzz. An entire solar system contained inside one body. "I was there," Edvard croaked, "but now I am here. Yet I am still there. Help me. Release me from this prison." The crack widened with a bone-splitting snap. Edvard's head pulled apart, unleashing a tsunami of black mucus. Hard, gnarled branches protruded from within his skull, a coral reef spotted by fungus and an infestation of worm-like creatures. I watched in awe as it blossomed across the room, unfurling until its roots touched either wall. "I can't take it," Edvard said. "Release me. Please, let me out." Slowly he lifted his hand towards me. His fingers brushed my cheek. They burned against my skin. Edvard, or the thing that looked like Edvard, began to weep. "I've been here long enough. Make it stop. Let me out." Part 4. This time when I woke up, I was greeted by a faint stream of light coming through the window. I bolted upright in bed, drenched in sweat and shivering. My heart pounded inside my chest. I looked around the room, but it was empty. No black goo, no fungus, no worms. No Edvard. The couch had been abandoned, blankets cast to the floor. Deathly afraid, I cautiously placed one foot on the ground. A moment passed before I had the courage to pull myself out of bed, to creep through the cabin as if every shadow might come alive and start attacking me. The kitchen was empty. The bathroom was empty. The shower was empty. It was just me, alone in that dimly lit cabin, accompanied only by a hissing silence as the wind whirled outside. Then the quiet broke as a voice crackled in over the headset. I went to the desk and booted up the rest of my rig. "Emmer, you there?" Donovan asked. "Emmer, answer the damn radio." "Yeah, I read you. What's going on?" "I've been trying to reach you for the last hour." "Oh, I was sleeping. What's up?" Is Ed with you?" "No, I don't think so." "You're not sure?" "I just woke up," I reminded him. "But the cabin's empty." "Did you check outside?" I lifted the curtain of the nearest window. With the current storm, I couldn't make out much, but the driveway was vacant. and my snowcat was missing. A set of treads led away from my cabin heading northeast. "Oh, son of a bitch, he's gone," I told Donovan. "He took my plow." "Oh, shit, I thought as much." There was a hiss of static interspersed with his words. Mia radioed me earlier. Said she couldn't sleep, so she checked the monitors to keep herself occupied and noticed Edvard's transmitter was on the move. I turned to the radar. Edvard's dot had come to a standstill in the exact location I found him yesterday. Mia's dot, though, was gradually shifting towards him, and Donovan's was en route to me. "Look, I'll be there in a few minutes," he said. "Get your gear on and be ready. I don't know what the hell he's trying to pull, but we're going to go get him." "Don, I don't know." "What?" "Emma, what?" "Interference." The static was getting louder. "If you hear, be there. Minutes." I tried to respond, but the signal was gone. Every channel I tried was overrun with interference. I ran into the bathroom and grabbed my clothes from the dryer. I didn't bother changing out of pajamas. By the time I had my boots on, I could hear the engine of Donovan's snowcat growling outside. I grabbed my equipment bag from the closet and ran out the door. There was no time for greetings or small talk. I climbed into the passenger seat, shut the door, and we were off. "Ah, he's lost it. He's actually lost his mind," Donovan said, teeth gritted, fingers strangling the steering levers. "What the hell happened yesterday?" "Nothing." "Oh, bullshit. You don't just wander into a snowstorm. What did he say to you?" "Lots of stuff, but it's not like he told me he was going to go do it again." "Why'd he do it in the first place?" "We thought he saw someone out there." Donovan jerked the controls to avoid a steep bank. "Oh, there's no one out there besides us." "That's what I told him." "What'd he say?" "Nothing." Oh, God damn it, Emma. Look, I'm telling the truth. He didn't say anything. I tried to convince him, and obviously he didn't believe me. "No, that doesn't make any sense," Donovan said. "Even if there were someone out here, they'd be dead by now. You can't survive 20 minutes in something like this, much less 12 hours. I don't think Ed's operating on logic for this one." Donovan muttered beneath his breath and steered us into a valley. "It doesn't matter. Once we get him back, we're calling in for transport. He's clearly experiencing some sort of psychotic breakdown. He needs more help than what any of us can offer him. He's just confused. Looking for your car in the wrong parking spot is confused. Wandering into a blizzard in the middle of a tundra is, well, I don't know what that is. It's a death wish, I thought." The snowcat shook against the wind. Drifts of snow swept across the windshield in curtains of white. Furtively, I was relieved Edvard had taken my transport. At least I didn't have to navigate the perils of the storm. Donovan was from Canada. Spent most of his life in bad weather with beater cars and vehicles less equipped than the plow. And I trusted him enough to get us there in one piece, more than I trusted myself. "And he was acting kind of strange last night," I eventually said when the storm had alleviated enough for the wipers to keep snow off the glass. When it didn't take every ounce of concentration for Donovan to maneuver the icy terrain. Didn't seem like he was fully there. What else did he say about this mystery person? Did he know them, or did he think that he knew them? He never said, and I didn't ask. You didn't ask? He was clearly going through something. It didn't seem like a good time to be interrogating him. Oh, you should have told us. It's not like I could have without him overhearing it, I countered. Plus, I didn't think it was this bad. Didn't think he was going to do it again. People have bad days and do dumb shit all the time. Spur-of-the-moment kind of decision-making. I thought after a hot meal and a good night's sleep, he might bounce back, come to his senses. Well, clearly not. What else you got, Doctor? Are you really going to pin this on me? Donovan glanced at me from the corner of his eyes. There was a ferocity in his gaze that quickly cooled. No, he said. I'm sorry. I'm not pissed, and I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm just freaked out and confused and tired of being, tired. More nightmares? All I have are nightmares or sleepless nights. Oh, it's getting old real fast, Am. feel like I'm losing my mind, too. But at least I'm sane enough to not abandon my cabin and look for someone who doesn't exist. Yeah, maybe. We found my snowcat parked about 5 feet away from Edvard's. His had amassed a pile of snow in the night, and mine was already starting to collect its fair share. Yeah, you got an anchor line? Donovan asked. Forgot mine. Yeah, don't worry about it. I've got enough for the both of us. What else did you bring? I unzipped the bag and peered inside. Some provisions, thermal blanket, binoculars, flare gun, extra gloves, climbing pick, and a med kit. Well, hopefully we won't need any of it, but keep it on you just in case. Yeah, way ahead of you. We exited the snowcat and were hit by a wall of snow and ice. I anchored myself to the passenger door and then clipped Donovan to me. We walked across the field, heading north. If memory served correct, we'd find Edvard about 15 or 20 yards from the snowcats. Well, this time he wasn't just standing there, staring at his feet. He was digging with a metal-headed shovel from my cabin. Mia was maybe 3 feet away, watching in horror, mumbling soft pleas for him to stop. But Edvard was a man possessed, so convinced that there was someone out here needing his attention, needing to be rescued. Edvard, Donovan called over the rage of the storm. Ed, enough. Come on, man. There's no one out here. Edvard's only response was to keep digging, scooping and flinging piles of snow over his shoulder that were taken adrift by the wind. Just put the shovel down and come with us, Donovan yelled. You've entertained this madness for too long. You'll catch your death out here. There was a harsh crack as the shovel met ice. Then, instead of digging, Edvard lifted the shovel and stabbed it into the ground, over and over and over, chipping away at the ice, trying to break through a layer that must have been a foot or two in width. Donovan got closer, and due to the constraints of the rope binding us, I too was dragged with him. That's it. Donovan's words succumbed to the howl of the storm. He stopped dead in his tracks at the crest of the hole, glaring down with a mixture of bewilderment and fear. Like the first time you reconcile your own mortality, when you realize just how finite life really is. Yeah, what's wrong? I asked. But Donovan wouldn't answer me, couldn't answer me. I inched forward, my boots crunching against the snow. Inside the hole, beneath the ice, was a shadow. A figure with mottled, pale blue flesh that must have stood 8 feet tall, if not taller. Its head was a knotting of branches around a jagged plate of what looked like bone. And there were a dozen tiny, beady eyes staring back up at us. No mouth or nose or any structure that resembled a person. I couldn't even be sure that I was looking at its head, or that those spots were its eyes. The human mind naturally makes comparisons and associations, puts things into a relative sense so as to further comprehend what cannot be understood. Well, this thing, though, was not something to be understood. Too foreign to reconcile. Fooling around the creature was a viscous black substance, the very same from my dream. Slowly, with every thrust of the shovel, cracks spread across the sheet of ice, its trenches growing deeper until that black substance was able to seep through. Then, as it wriggled its way free of the tomb, it began to lift into the air, flowing upward towards the sky. I won't do it, Edvard grunted as he brought the tip of the shovel down, threatening to snap the wooden shaft. I've been under long enough. Edward, stop, Donovan said, weak with fear. Stop digging. It's not fair, Edvard exclaimed. I don't deserve this. As the shovel lifted into the air, Donovan grabbed the top of the handle. A game of tug-of-war broke out between the two, but I don't think Edvard realized he was playing. He was far too consumed to notice the disturbance. He just knew that he needed to keep digging. Yeah, help me, Donovan said. Begrudgingly, I wrapped my hands around the length of the handle that planted my feet in the snow. Together, we started to pry the shovel away from his grasp. Then, in a fit of rage, Edvard turned towards us with his lips peeled back in a snarl. You can't stop me. He released the shovel. Donovan and I fell backwards into the snow. By the time I got to my feet, Edvard was out of the hole and upon us. He attacked Donovan first, ripping away the protective goggles and sinking his teeth into Donovan's right eye. I tried to stop him, but Edvard backhanded me with an unnatural strength, knocking me into the hole. I crashed against the ice with a dull thud. The cracks twisted and split around me. An onslaught of incoherent whispers snaked through my mind. It wasn't any language I'd heard before, but the very sound of it, the timbre of the voices, were like nails on a chalkboard, steel wool against a sheet of metal, growing louder by the second until it felt as if my brain might rip itself apart. Images flooded my mind. An endless stretch of black. I could see the stars and asteroids, the fiery sinews of a boiling planet. Galaxies devoid of life, devoid of anything and everything. Darkness all around me, cold and suffocating, deathly silent. My only saving grace was the sound of Mia screaming, an ear-piercing screech that made the whispers fade just long enough for me to climb out of the hole. When I returned to the surface, Donovan was on the ground, convulsing. He had his hand over his eye, an attempt to staunch the bleeding. Mia was on Edvard's back, her arms wrapped around his throat. But this had no apparent effect. Her weight and motion were nothing to him. He stood straight as an arrow, still and calm as the night. A blank, faraway look in those once warm eyes. "I won't be ignored," Edvard croaked. "I won't be forgotten. You understand, don't you?" Then, just as it happened in my dream, his head split apart. A mass of darkness spewed from his skull, projecting its own miniature replication of a galaxy. With it came that coral reef of barnacle-covered branches, a pink sludge that, against all logic and reason, I knew was Edvard's brain. Reformed and reshaped into this foreign matter that coalesced with the black sludge orbiting his body. Mia's screams were silenced as the darkness swallowed her whole. One moment she was there, and the next, there was no trace other than a glove that had been pulled off her hand during the struggle. She'd been absorbed and dissolved. Edvard spasmed and ripped open his coat, tore away the shirt underneath. A seam cut vertically across his chest, a mouth with rows upon rows of teeth. At the center was a bright light, a swallowed star. I squinted and turned away, bringing my hand up to shield my eyes against its glow. "I have traveled across oceans of cosmos to be here." His voice reverberated like a perpetual echo carried across the hollow of a mountain range. "I have endured tidal waves of darkness and deterioration to find this. You will not take it away from me." Donovan, fueled by adrenaline and numbed by shock, rushed in and thrust my climbing pick into the center of Edvard's chest. He yanked on the handle, tearing a gash that bled blood black as night. Edvard seized him by the throat, squeezing so hard I could hear the bone snapping. Then, as Donovan's mouth opened to scream or maybe to inhale the breath that would not come, the flume of darkness funneled down his throat. There was no swelling, no noticeable inflation. It had happened too fast. He just exploded, popped like a balloon. Bone and muscle and tissue splattered across the snow, painting it in shades of red. My instincts kicked in then, and I ran. I followed the rope back to the snowcat, but as I moved to climb into the driver's seat, there was a tug on the other part of the rope, the section that had been attached to Donovan. I was pulled out of the snowcat and slowly dragged through the snow. Thinking quick, I unclipped myself and scrambled to my feet. I leapt into the plow and pushed the steering levers forward at full speed. The wipers fought against the snow that blanketed the windshield, but they couldn't clear the glass. I never saw him, but I felt the jolt as I ran Edvard over, crushing his body beneath the treads. Then, beyond reasons of my own understanding, I stumbled out from the snowcat and rounded to the back storage compartments where we kept spare fuel canisters. I took the nearest one and tracked down Edvard's body. As expected, it was still active. There was no mist to indicate breathing, but the black matter continued to writhe from his skull, coalescing around his broken, distorted body. He looked up at me through bloodshot eyes. "Don't." "I'm sorry," I whispered, unscrewing the cap and dousing the thing that was Edvard in gasoline. I was acting on impulse, giving little thought or consideration to my choices. I can't say if I did the right thing, but at the time it didn't matter. It felt like the right thing, the right choice. I found my bag and retrieved the flare gun from within. Then I took aim, my finger on the trigger. Slowly, as if it were a struggle, Edvard lifted his fractured head from the snow to look at me. In place of words was a prolonged, guttural moan that echoed across the sky. I must have been half mad because it felt as if the entire world was shaking beneath my feet. I fired the flare and set his body ablaze. I stayed long enough to watch him succumb to the flames. The flesh and darkness withered into ashes, stolen and scattered by the wind. And in time, the fire began to wilt. Nothing could persist in the Arctic, not even a burning inferno. Retreating to the snowcat, I twisted the levers and started back towards the cabin. The trip was longer than I remembered, and there was a moment when I was sure I'd been lost. But through a break in the storm, I saw my cabin, saw my home. When I was back inside, I stripped from my gear and cranked the heat. Then I retrieved my headset to report to the company, but there was no response. Too much interference, too much static to get a message across. I thought about taking the snowcat to the next cabin over. The door would be locked, but I could get in if I broke the window. Maybe their system would still be active. Before I could follow through with this plan, I heard a voice in my head. A distant whisper from the recesses of my mind. Slowly getting louder, its voice becoming less of a gargle and more like my own. It dawned on me then what this was, what had happened. A parasite that infects its host from the inside out. I can't say how long it's been here or where it came from, but I know what it can do. At least, I have a semblance of understanding. I'd seen what it did to Edvard, watched as it corrupted him within a matter of hours. Saw the change in real time, whether I'd realized it or not. It left me wondering if the person I'd talked to the night prior was Edvard or it. Maybe it was a mixture of the two, occurring at an awkward interval while one entity assimilated the other. The incubation period before the infection completely set in. And I was about to go through the very same thing. So I did what I thought was best. I went to my computer, opened a document, and began typing. I don't know if the radio will come back online, and this is my only means of warning the others. Well, hours have passed since that moment. I can feel it now. The voice worming its way through my brain, trying to make its thoughts my own. It's like a tickle at the base of my skull, like trying to perceive the differences between two photos that are almost identical, save a few minor changes. I know now that I won't make it out of this. I'll succumb to this thing by nightfall, losing any sense of self along the way. My only hope is that someone will recover this hard drive, that they'll read this and, against all plausibility, believe it to be true. That they'll know to abandon this place, mark it as uninhabitable, and, if I'm lucky, if we're all lucky, no one else will ever come here. No one else will discover what lies beneath the ice. This thing, whatever it is, it's getting close. I'm forgetting moments. I'm losing track of time. I don't want to become it, and I don't want it to become me either. There's only one choice left. This isn't an easy decision, but I have to do it. I've already prepared for it, and I just have to hope that during my next blackouts, I'll eventually resurface long enough to pull it off. I've emptied the remaining gasoline cans outside my cabin. I've got a bundle of flares waiting by the door. Seemed to work with Edvard. I imagine it'll work with me as well. I hope they don't make my family try to identify my body. There won't be much of anything left to identify. Just some charred bones, maybe a flick of hair. My family doesn't deserve to see that. I hope the company lies to them, tells them our expedition was a failure, that we were swallowed by the storm and froze to death, or that we starved. Something peaceful and humane. Something that won't haunt them for the rest of their lives. I have to wonder, though, if what I'm about to do will be considered an act of self-annihilation or not. It's still me, technically, organically. This thing is infecting my insides. It's taking me over, erasing every last trace of what makes me, me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't able to overcome it. Sorry that I couldn't defy this thing controlling me. I can only hope that no one else will have to go through this. That no one else will know this feeling. Will know what it's like to lose yourself to a dominant parasite living within the grey matter of your brain. I wouldn't wish that on even my worst enemy. This is Emma of Cabin J from the United States Arctic Research Outpost signing off. If this message has been successful, you will never have heard about me or our operation. If I've failed, then the population has most likely been infected. It'll be hard to spot at first, especially if this creature is clever and knows how to conceal itself. But trust me, the infection will spread. It'll pass from person to person, home to home, continent to continent, until no one is left untouched. So good luck, everyone. Stay safe, stay alert, stay alive. And whatever you do, don't go looking under the ice. It's not worth it. Just let it go. So a fantastic one there. I love the setting of the poles. Arctic, Antarctica, wonderful. Okay, the last vestiges of untouched areas by our hands anyway, and probably for a good reason. And who knows what's out there? Who knows? Anyway, read that all in one go, so my brain has gone into that stage where I start waffling at the end. I know you like these little chats that I have, but sometimes it's just like, it really is. Anyway, so, yep, hope you enjoyed that one. Thoughts, feelings, anything else you want to say in the comment section below the video, and as ever, I will do my best to join in the conversation. Yeah, really interesting one. Loved it. Hope you did too. I will be back again on Wednesday, probably with something a bit longer. I'm going for something around a 2-hour news story on Wednesday, so make sure you join me again, yeah? Till then, my dear friends, you all sleep well. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this story today. Really means a lot to me and to the author of the story, of course. Well, if you want to know more about me, I'm pretty much everywhere on social media. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. You can download my music on SoundCloud. I've got a Patreon if you feel like. Throw me $1 or $2. Very much appreciated. And of course, on Reddit, I have a place where you can leave stories if you want me to read one that you've written. Well, hoping to see you all again very soon. Till then, sweet dreams. Bye-bye.